Hey folks, quick market update here. This is Friday, November 21st, around noon Eastern. Just really quick again, these videos, I'm just doing this out of convenience, posting on YouTube, but they're really for family and friends. And that's not investment advice, just letting you know what I'm doing as far as, my investments and, shorter and longer term outlook as far as the market's concerned and individual stocks and ETFs and so forth. But had a crazy day yesterday. Everybody saw the Nvidia earnings come out, Wednesday night. They did fantastic and, thought that the bottom was in. Futures were up huge and the market opened up. We were up 125, 130 points yesterday on the S&P. So like everybody else, I mean, I was, really, really incredibly in the green on that. And should have taken profits, but had no idea that we were going to drop the way we did. Ended up closing down over 100 points, so unbelievable reversal on the S&P, and got stopped out of most of my positions actually. So that was surprising, especially how good the Nvidia earnings were, but there was just a massive sell-off. That started around mid-morning, 10:30. I think the algorithm started kicking in, and there's some big institutional selling. So clearly, short term, we're still in a downtrend. The market's up, as you can see here, over 80 points on the S&P this morning after opening lower. But just a couple of key things as far as the indexes are concerned that I want to keep in mind, and some of the leading stocks. So we got above the 50-day. You can see this candle here yesterday. I'll do this at 3-month here so you can see, but this candle yesterday, we were well above the 50-day in the morning, and then we just closed way below. So that was a very, very bearish candle that we saw yesterday. So we're below the 10. The 10 and the 20 have crossed over. The 10's crossed over the 20, and now the 10 has crossed over the 50-day moving average. The 20 is about to cross over the 50-day here. So that's all bearish as far as the moving averages are concerned. And if you look at my last couple of videos, I've been focused on this upper trend line here, which was really my concern and why I was taking profits. Really going back to August, I started selling, thinking that this first white trend line here, if we look at this guy, let me do the 2-year. I was looking at this trend line here that goes back to 2020, 21. This guy right here, I'm trying to capture it. I got too many lines on here, but anyway, I started selling some positions here, and then we got above it, and so I drew a second trend line, which goes back even further, and I was selling even further in this area, and then we got above that, and then I'm thinking, hey, we're going to form a new channel, and then that got basically rejected. We're back into this first trend line, and then we went below the second trend line, and we're still below that now, but this is why I was selling into strength, because of what was happening up here as far as these trend lines. And then secondarily, when you look at the MACD, which is one of the go-to technical indicators, moving average convergence divergence. If you look at this negative divergence that I've been talking about here, you can see here as we were making higher highs in the S&P. This is for all the indexes, but the MACD was making lower highs, and so that's called negative divergence. So when you see that, it tells you there's going to be a change in what's happening as far as the market is concerned, and this is based on volume and momentum and all that. So you could see when the selling signal here is when you cross this baseline, which is 0. When you start going below that, that's a sell signal, and so we've done that now. And the question is how much lower will this histogram go here and these moving average lines with the MACD? I'm not thinking we're going to see anything like this with the bear market, but we may see something pretty substantial here now that this is below 0. And that's the question, is where does this end up, right, as far as the the indexes are concerned. So I've been talking about the 50-day. If I go back to the 1-year chart here, the 50-day moving average, this is this blue line. That's critical, right? Got to get above that. So we're below the 10 to 20 to 50. The 200-day, we've got the magenta, which is the 150, and then you got the gray one here, which is the 200-day. So 200-day is about mid-channel, right, between my two trend lines. I was thinking, when I was looking at the MACD, that we'd be somewhere between the 50 and the 150, and that's exactly where we are right now. So sometimes you get lucky with those estimates, but we're only down about 6% from the top here, which was 69.20. So we've only taken a 6%, and typically, I don't think we're going to see more than 8 to 12% max with this correction, because I think obviously the trend is still up. We're in a bull market, and bull markets typically last 12 to 18 months. So, we're still in the beginning stages here of a bull market, but this is our first real, major correction. And, we took out the former high here of 65.50, or former low of 65.50. So we took out 66.31 right here on November 7th. And then yesterday we took out the low of 65.50, which was on October 10th. So we've taken out two serious former lows here as which were acting as support. Now we're above that. We're at 66.17. Can we get back above 66.31, which is going to act as resistance now? So what happens when you break a support line is that now acts as resistance. So we've gotten above the 65.50 this morning. I don't know what the volume looks like, but we'll have to see what that, what kind of participation there is. But you got a lot of resistance up here now. You've got the former low of 66.31, which we're approaching, and then you've got this 50-day, which is at 67.11. So those two areas are going to be a lot of resistance. And then on top of that, when you look at the volatility index, which is important, even though we're down 8% today on the VIX, we're at 24.26 right now. This thing is still really elevated. So ideally, if this were to be a bottom, if that was put in this morning, this thing's got to get down below 20, and really, in the teens for, I think, the market bottom to be in. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And same thing on the NASDAQ. If we go over to the NASDAQ, we're well below the 50-day here. So a lot of technical damage done. And then the other thing I just want to point out is, we've been talking about these trend lines here, right, for several months. If I go back to the S&P, what I like to look at is, right, this is long term. So this is the 1-year chart. The 2-year chart, you can see my double trend lines on the top here. So, this gives you a real good idea of what's happening here, longer term, these trend lines. And I base really everything on trend lines, not everything, but my primary focus is on these trend lines and support levels, which are these green lines. And, the green lines are typically former highs, former lows. I like to look at volume levels as well with these former highs and former lows. Some people call that, it's something that they look at exclusively called VWAP, which is, volume weighted average stuff. But, I really primarily look at trend lines and former support, as far as former lows and resistance as former highs. I'm making decisions, especially with individual stocks. But, these are longer term, charts, that I'm looking at here. When you focus in, for example, on the shorter term, if I do, let's say, a 30-minute candle for the past month, you also can draw trend lines. And so this is a good example of that on the S&P here. These blue lines that I've drawn, this goes back to October. You can see here that we're bouncing between these trend lines now. We broke below that yesterday. So this was yesterday's huge gap up. And then you can see we started selling mid-morning, and we came all the way down and filled that gap. And then we actually came below this blue trend line when we broke the 65.50 level here, which is this green line. But now we're back above it. So even though, we're in a short-term downtrend here, you could actually look at these shorter-term trend lines and channels as well for making, buying and selling decisions. So, we're back in this channel now. Could we go all the way up here and hit this and then break that? That would be very bullish. And then you start taking out, a former high, and here a former high. That's kind of what I'm looking at from a micro level now. And same thing with the NASDAQ. You can see the NASDAQ here with this channel here. We came even closer to this upper trend line here. Came very close, and then boom, we sold off. And then we went pretty far below the former low here. But now we're back in that channel. So, if this channel holds up, we can end up coming to the top of this blue line and still making lower lows and lower highs. But, you have a short-term swing trade in here that you could play. So anyway, I wanted to point that out. I like to look at the smaller intervals here. This is Active Trader Pro program that Fidelity has, but any of your trading software platforms, you could look at shorter term scale like this. And I always use logarithmic scale, not linear when I'm drawing these trend lines. But this is again another way to look at things. You got to be on top of it. Obviously, this can change like it did yesterday very, very quickly. If you were able to take advantage of this spike and then sell your longs and then go short here with something like SQQQ, which is a triple leverage short on the Nasdaq. I mean, you're talking about some huge moves here. Same thing with the S&P. I mean, if you're able to time this, obviously you got to be, looking at this and having alerts on your phone and stuff. But, if you start getting up here and you do a sale of your long and then pick up your shorts, for a swing trade, you're obviously taking advantage of these shorter term moves here like that. But these are huge right now. I mean, unbelievable. Like 200 points some move yesterday in the S&P, well over 200 points. So, anyway, that's what I'm looking at shorter term. And then really quick, as far as individual stocks, if I go back to the yearly chart, you can just see like NVIDIA, right? I mean, you would think that thing would be going through the roof right now. It's only up, less than $1. And it was down quite a bit today, low of 172. And same thing like Palantir. Palantir is actually down today, so that's not doing well. Microsoft is down today. I mean, this is really getting hit. I mean, there was a good support level here at, around 493, 492, and that just got taken out. So a lot of weakness in some big names. The ones that I was talking about in the last videos. NXT looks like it's getting some support there. NVT is down today. Bloom Energy, talked about that one in the last video. I mean, this is down over 4%. It took a real hit this morning. It was down to 76, even number $76. So, I mean, some of these leading stocks here are just getting hammered right now, and this is below the 50-day. Micron has been another leader. I mean, that really got shellacked. It's above the 50-day right now. See if that can hold, but that traded below its 50-day this morning. SanDisk is another leader. That got hammered again. I mean, it's above its 50-day, but you could just see here the last couple of days. I mean, these are all just getting hammered. So a lot of technical damage, with these stocks. I was looking at some of the rare earth stuff. TMQ, that's up 8% today. I think this is a good support level. But some of these other ones just got really, really hammered. Energy Fuels. I mean, this thing just really got hammered yesterday. Another rare earth one is USAR. I mean, this is just getting hammered, well below all the support levels. MP is another one, that's down today. NB about flat right now, but breaking former lows and well below some of these key moving averages. So yeah, I thought the rare earth stuff would find some support here. I got stopped out of these, and again, some of these others like Microsoft and Bloom Energy, they all had good support levels and they just broke through. So I'll have to see what happens here in the coming days and weeks. But Apple is one that's hanging in there. It's up 5 today, 271. That's above its 50-day. It's above its 10 and 20 as well. So I like Apple a lot. But these are far and few in between. Just not a lot of good structure here right now as far as some of the leading stocks. And a lot of them, tech stocks, are really down even today with the S&P up 80 some points. So again, is this the bottom? It could be. But what I'm looking for basically is, if I go back to this 30-minute candle from a short-term time frame, you have to see this upper trend line get broken and these former highs get taken out before I think we can safely say that we're in an uptrend again. Otherwise, if this thing keeps selling off, we're just going to continue to go down further. And then the question is do we go down to the 150-day or some level of support like the I think the 62.12 level, if we were to sell off, I think that would be really, really strong support, especially the first time you come down to the 200-day moving average in a correction, in your bull market. That's a real, real strong support level. I'm not saying we're going to get there, but if we were to somehow come down that far, I think you're going to get a really big bounce here, because you've got these two things coinciding about the same area: the former low of 62.12 and this 200-day, which is at 61.62 right now. So I think that would be a really strong area for support. The 150-day would be strong support, and any of these former lows in between here. But I think, again, based on the MACD, if we look at that again one more time, this here, you can see it better in the 2-year chart, but this is, this has to curl up and get back above zero before you're safely in an uptrend. And ideally, you got to get back above this trend line here in the MACD. And right now, we're in the sell mode here, as far as where this thing looks on the histogram. We'll say with the slow stochastic, we are below 20. So you can see right now we're at like 1528. So, this is the area you want to start looking as far as your watch list. The buy signal on this indicator is when you get back above this 20 line. So this green line is a 20 marker. When you get back above that, that's basically saying, hey, this is when you want to get back in. Now we could go back below it again, but typically you can see here when you get above it, that's when you take off. You could have some noise like this where you stay below it for a while, but typically once you get back above 20, then that's when the market takes off. And it's, especially the bull market, that's when you want to be looking at new buys. So we are there, and a couple other factors. We're coming upon Thanksgiving next week, so the holiday is typically, especially December, the holiday season is typically a very good time for the market as far as the indexes are concerned. Now, there have been times when we've had some pretty solid corrections. I remember in 2018 we had a really big correction right before Christmas. So it's not always true that the market's going to be up in December, but that's typically the case. Most of the times there's lower volume, and the market tends to rise on fewer buyers and less sellers. So in any event, that's the update. I think we'll have to see what happens here. This to me is you got to look at kind of what's happening on the shorter term scale. And so going back to this 30-minute set of candles on both the S&P and the NASDAQ, this is kind of what I'm keeping my eye on. If we could get above yesterday's high, which was around 67.70, if we can get above that and then get above this downtrend line, then that to me would be a very, very bullish thing, and we get it back above the 50-day, obviously. But until that happens, I'm going to be staying mostly in cash, until I see that, as well as the VIX, getting below 20, and ideally even below like 17. I think on the VIX that would be, probably when we could say, hey, we're pretty confident at that point. Then the up trend is going to continue. Okay. So that's the update from my perspective. That's what I'm looking at. I got stopped out of a lot of stuff yesterday, but fortunately I was selling into strength when we were hitting these upper trend lines here. So I had gotten more and more into cash here as we were going up, and we just have to see here what this looks like. I mean, typically when you do see a lower low like this in a bull market, it could be a double bottom. So the fact that we took out the 65.50 marker, this lower low, you're going to get a flush. A lot of people have their stops just below this, from an index standpoint. And when you have a fake breakdown and you have a big day like we're having today for the new uptrend. So, those fake breakouts, just like a fake breakdown can be just like a fake breakout as far as the move. The next move could be really, really strong. And so that could be what's happening here. But right now, as most people know, I base a lot of my stuff on these trend lines and the moving averages. And, right now we're below the 50-day. And so that's one of the key things. I think for me to become a little bit or a lot more aggressive in this market, I have to see us go above the 50-day here, this blue line on the S&P, and as well as on the NASDAQ. which is right here. So you can see we got a ways to go before we get back up there. And we've had the crossover, like I said, of the 10 and 20. You can see that here. If I zoom in here really quick, you can see here this kind of purplish line and then this brownish red line here that crossed over. And so, some traders, just based on, moving averages, they will be out when that crosses over like that, the 10 and the 20, and they'll get back in when the 10 crosses above the 20. And you want to see these curling up. Obviously, these are pointing down right now, so we're clearly in a short-term downtrend. And if right now the 50-day is kind of flat, but if that starts to curl over, then that tells you, we're certainly heading lower. But we'll have to see how that shakes out. Okay, that's the update. Hope everybody's doing well. Have a good weekend.